Hello, everyone. I am so delighted you all are here for this conversation. I'm Christine Coe. I'm an author, podcaster, and mother of two, and I'm here with two incredible guests. First, I have Latham Thomas, founder of Mama Glow and the Mama Glow Foundation. She's also an author of Own Your Glow and part of Oprah's Super Soul 100. Welcome, Latham. So happy to have you here. We're also here with the wonderful Dr. Cheryl Ziegler, who is the best-selling author of Mommy Burnout, the host of Dr. Cheryl's Pod Couch, and a regular national and local news contributor. She's a therapist who holds a doctorate in psychology and is a licensed professional counselor in the state of Colorado. Welcome, Cheryl. Should I call
Thanks.
you Cheryl or should I call you Dr. Cheryl, Dr. Ziegler? Preference?
You can call me whatever you're comfortable calling me.
All right, cool, cool. Well, we have a really important conversation today. We're going to talk about how to manage motherhood and put ourselves first in this post pandemic world, because I think, as all of us can agree, we've all done a lot of holding other people and putting other people first. So, I have a lot of questions for you both, and I'm going to dive right in with the same question for both of you. How are new moms doing? I've been thinking a lot about this question, especially for moms who had babies during the pandemic the last 2 years. It's been a lot. And I'm just curious about, you two both have very unique lenses, and I'm curious about what you are seeing as the greatest challenges for this particular group of moms right now. Cheryl, do you want to start?
Sure. So I would say that moms right now are just starting to come out of a period of time where it was probably pretty lonely, much more isolated than early motherhood already can be. And so it's this period of time where it's like, I want to meet new moms. I want to talk to other parents. I want to know what other people are doing. So I think that natural exchange and playtime and learning together, they've really been excluded from. They haven't had those opportunities. Even new moms who may have toddlers, they didn't have those opportunities to meet other parents at drop-offs and pickups and things like that. So I think right now where we're at is that they're coming out and they want to connect.
How about you, Lathan? What are you seeing from moms, pandemic moms?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting that we have lived through a time in the zeitgeist where there's a marked difference in how a particular group of people experience the perinatal continuum, because everybody globally had a similar experience, right? Like Dr. Ziegler said, that was extremely isolating. The things that make us human, like connection, touch, being in proximity, having meals together, doing the things that we do socially. Coming out of this, I think there's like an awkwardness in how people, like, they don't know what feels comfortable, what's okay to do, what's not okay to do. And a lot of people, I think, have anxiety about being around people, and then a heightened anxiety around in the environment. Are my children safe? Would I be safe? Am I making myself more exposed, to potential pathogens? I think there's so much really like angst for people coming out of this period, which is, I mean, it's unprecedented what we just lived through. And I think it's important, as we're supporting people, to really understand that you just survived a global pandemic. Like everything you're doing is enough, And so this idea of like pushing ourselves and trying to do all the things coming outside, I think it's important just to recall and remember and keep to the front of our minds that we just survived something unprecedented. It's hugely impactful on all of us and as a society. And that for us as mothers or caregivers, like, this is a time that we need to like really move slowly, be gentle with ourselves as we kind of come out on the other side.
Absolutely. And I think we should put, everything you're doing is enough on a t-shirt or something, a mug, anything. I have a follow-up for you both, because something, as you were both talking, and I was thinking about how extraordinarily difficult this time was. I also feel like it was a time where people kind of surprised themselves, or they discover new things. And certainly I wrote an article about how adults were finding new friendships during the pandemic for CNN a little while ago. And I was struck by one. There was a new mom, like a mom who had had a baby during the pandemic. And she said that she found this kind of new and unexpected level of bravery, going up and just sort of reaching out and saying hi to other new moms on social media because that's all there was. So I'm curious, sorry, long run up, but I'm curious if either of you heard from either clients or on social or whatever examples of kind of moments of joy and connection for moms who had babies during the pandemic.
I've heard of a lot of different types of ways that people have been innovative with it. Particularly, I would say in the fertility continuum, because many people had to forego fertility cycles, which was so devastating. If you had like a plan in place and then that got interrupted, and then there was so much uncertainty around like when that would start back up for many people, and depending on their state. Um, and so what we saw a lot of was like these self guided and self facilitated groups of people like convening mostly online, but sometimes in person. And they would do it in pods. And so, because a lot of people were just feeling, so much devastation around not being able to continue this path forward, they were finding other people who were also going through similar situations, but also figuring out what solutions they could come up with together and what information. So, there was a lot of information and knowledge sharing. And then also like a safety net of just a community of people in the same going through the same thing together. I thought that was really beautiful, and it was peer led. So it wasn't like they engaged providers necessarily. They kind of just did it to support each other, which is really cool. I think a lot of people also connected through some of their care providers. So what we saw a lot was, people who had particular life experiences that were surfacing, or challenges where we saw, oh, this other person went through the same thing, connecting people that way. And so it was like kind of this peer to peer support that would happen as a result of a doula connecting someone with like their other client. So I feel like things like that were happening much more, and also like through the virtual lens. So people were doing texting, they were doing the WhatsApp groups, and doing things like, hey, how you doing today? What's your high today? Right? What's a low today? What do you need support with? And they were just doing this amongst themselves because nobody really understood what they were going through. And I think that when you're in the space of being a practitioner or a clinical provider, right? Like, there's only so much that you can do to support people, because when they come to see you and then outside you can give recommendations, but what do they do, how do they design their life around those recommendations, and what do the supports look like that they can create for themselves? So I think there was a lot of ingenuity around staying
Mhm.
connected.
Yeah, for sure. Cheryl, how about you? What did you see?
Yeah. So I think in the lens that I experienced the pandemic, with my patients, what I saw were women becoming entrepreneurs, really saying, either I have to leave this workforce or I always wanted to do this. And they did it during this time. And that was unbelievable. So when we talk about innovation and creation, I think that there were a lot of women in particular that were moved to really start what they had always dreamed of or what they were scared to do before, and it just felt like, hey, what's there to lose? I'm going to go all in on this. I'm home. I've got more of this concentrated time. So there was that period of time that maybe, it's easy to forget now, but we shouldn't forget, where it was more like the, beginning to middle of 2020, where people were home, but they were getting creative. They were finding their sense of humor. They were really just, I think, dreaming bigger and maybe feeling like, we don't know what the world is going to bring to us, but I know what I want to do in it. And so that's really what I saw. Lots of creativity, ingenuity, and entrepreneurship, which was really exciting.
I love that. Oh, that just energizes me. Actually, that's wonderful. Well, as people find new talents and new things to do, this actually leads me to my next question, which is changes course just a smidge. You both do a lot of things. I can relate to that. I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. So I want to talk a little bit about multitasking and mindfulness, because there are the people who say, "Oh yes, you can multitask and do all these things," and then the people say multitasking is terrible for you, etc. So we know that we should be paying attention and being mindful in our lives, but obviously it's hard when we have so many different demands. If you had to recommend a really simple, actionable way for moms to maintain mindfulness in the midst of all these many things to do, what would it be?
This is something that comes up a lot. So the first thing I say, and I wrote about also in Mommy Burnout, was become an awesome monotasker. So just because we can multitask, I found myself actually using that word yesterday, and I can actually say like, wow, I haven't heard myself say that, but I needed to multitask. So I can do it, but it doesn't mean that I want to do it, that it's good for anybody for me to do it. So it's like a tool in my back pocket. Sure, if I need to multitask, I could do that, but it's not the way I want to navigate the world. And if I had one thing to say, I would say in order to keep your presence and stay with your mindfulness and not feel a need to multitask, really put the phone down. I think it's phones that are very distracting to parents. So they'll be, again, I get it because it's a little bit of an escape, but if you are feeding your child or pushing them on a swing, even taking a walk, and they're in the stroller, I think those are opportunities where moms feel like, oh, good, well, now I could just like scroll or I can, escape a little bit. But I actually think those are opportunities to be present. Those are opportunities to be really focused because that's where attachment and bonding happens. When you're talking about the birds and the trees that you're seeing and the airplane that flew by, and oh, how high are we going on the swing? Those are really those opportunities for bonding. And I understand that for some moms it also feels like a time to like, oh, they get a little bit of a break, like, oh, I can, the image of a mom sort of pushing a baby in a swing and then having a phone right here. But really, what I would say is don't take that opportunity to get your scrolling or your social media stuff done. Really, just to be really present in those moments. They're precious and they contribute to attachment and bonding.
Mm. Yeah, and I would also add, as somebody who works on the computer like all day long, that those moments when you can be out there connecting and then also extending your gaze, like very, very, very useful and very good for your health. Lathan, your thoughts on this question?
Yeah, I love we're so on the same page because I actually call it unitasking and wrote about it in my book on your glow. So we like have that same theme going. Yeah, I agree. I mean, phone fasting is critical. Like actually scrolling your phone is actually a cognitive event. It's an activity that engages your brain fully. So it's actually not a break. So the idea that like just doing this is like it's not a break. It actually engages your brain in so many ways that you probably don't want to, and that you don't realize, and takes up more energy. So if we can think about the slowing down, right? And I always think about like the simplicity of like washing the dishes, and I just do that. Or if I'm going to write an email, I'm writing one email. Or if I'm cooking, I'm not like cooking and then also trying to talk on the phone and also trying to like, like we yeah, just like Dr. Ziegler said, you can do it all, but you shouldn't, so think about like how to design your life in ways where you can delegate. And this happens during pregnancy, right? Like this is a time where we start to notice the shifts in our body and in our consciousness, and where we actually need to ask for help. And then sometimes we do need somebody to like tie our shoes because our belly is big now, or we need somebody to run to get that sandwich that we're craving, because we don't feel like walking or whatever it would be, right? um and so we get to practice asking for support during pregnancy so that when our babies arrive and we do need an extra set of hands, or a community around us, like it doesn't feel foreign, and we also have people that we can rely upon for that. And so and also if we have support around us, then we can have time to step away and have moments of self-care, right? And I don't just mean like, taking a bubble bath, because you can't bubble bath your problems away, but I do mean like having some time that is devoted to just like yourself, right? And that can be on a moment to moment basis. That could be like, oof, I feel a little bit tired now. Let me just go lay down and take a nap. Right. Oh, I was on the computer a lot today. Let me go take a walk. Right. It is just checking in. Right. And just saying, like, right now, I need to go do something, not like on Sunday from 2 to 4, I'm going to do this thing for myself. But every day I show up to the office of help and I give myself like, what I need to kind of continue to stay in optimal health. And it's really hard to do this when when we're not practicing, right? And also when we don't have supports around us. And that's what we see a lot for folks who have been living through the pandemic. They don't have those supports in place and didn't get to practice all those skill sets during pregnancy because they were isolated.
Right, right. It's interesting because as I hear you talk, I think about all of those moments during the day as these little micro transitions, right? Where we're going from this thing, we're going to the next thing. Latham, I wanted to ask you about the sort of bigger picture transitions around motherhood. I'm sure you both can, but I can remember, for example, the runway preparing for pregnancy and being pregnant right after my kid was born, what it meant to go back to work. I mean, we were talking about micro transitions, and now these are the big ones, right?
Mhm.
So, I imagine some of the things you've been talking about apply, but I'd be curious about what you recommend for some ways that moms who are navigating these just really overwhelming transitions, how they can put their health and their nutrition and their wellness first when so much else is going on.
Yeah. So it becomes not a question of like, like how do I figure out how to do this and am I worthy of this, but it becomes a matter of this is the path forward, right? Like for me to succeed as a parent, as a human, through this postnatal experience, I have to be well, right, to fully recover from the demands of pregnancy and birth and then the acute postpartum period into latent postpartum and delayed postpartum. Like we need support, we need rest, we need retreat, we need silence, we need engagement, we need all these different things, right? But I think that the the work that we do as doulas when we come in to support people and help them think about the design, I think about it from this lens, right? Like, how do you design a life that you don't have to escape, right? Because if we think about, like Dr. Ziegler was talking about, if you're on your phone, right, you're going someplace else, right? And yes, we all do it, right? We're engaged in this world that's technical and on our phones and like living seamlessly between apps, and there's a whole life happening around us and also inside of us, right? And so people are like attuned to what's happening in their bodies, right? Learning to listen to what's happening in their bodies, learning to use that as information to be able to share with their provider. Information that also, by the way, in many cases could be signaling health. It could be signaling a health concern, right? And so part of that has to be that we developed a really strong acute sense of being able to listen. That has to happen early, right? And we were thrust into that through pregnancy, right? You're like, what is this feeling? What is this sensation? What is that? Like, what is this aversion? Like, all of these things are ways of our body allowing us and teaching us, like, sort of how to tap in and how to listen. And so I think the first piece of that is like learning to listen to your body and its unique needs, right? And so how does your body signal to you that you're tired? How does your body signal to you that you're full? How does your body signal to you that you're dehydrated? Like, what are the senses? Like, what comes through your body? And listen, and then also act on that learning, right? So hydrate, eat when you feel hungry. If you know that you're somebody, like I know myself, if I don't eat right away, my blood sugar will dip. I'm so moody. So I know
Hmm.
I have to carry snacks. I know I have to have like a water bottle in a car ride. I also know that I'm the first person that has to pee when we're on a long drive. So I'm like thinking that through, right? So you have to start to actually anticipate your needs on the journey. And then if you
Yeah.
know you can't meet them on your own, which most of us can't, right? And we're not designed to, then you find providers that are aligned to help you. You find people in community to help you. And I also love the idea of having like a buddy system or like a sister system, right? Where there's somebody who's like maybe your peer or a little bit your elder on the path, right? So maybe they have twins, you're about to have twins, and you can like, sync up in a friendship where you have that support. And then think about also other people who can kind of support you on the other side. Like, are there other folks, like somebody who can cook really well, somebody who's really great at newborn care, maybe someone who's great with somebody who makes you laugh, like have different people who can play roles in your life. So on the other side, you get the quality care you need to thrive, right? Because we know that we don't have in the United States, a system of, I should say, a postpartum culture that supports, birthing individuals. Instead, you look at all the other global cultures; they have an incredible postpartum tradition in place, and in the United States, it's not reflected in any way, even in our policy. Like it's a huge policy gap that we don't have federal paid leave, and that 1 in 4 women go back to work 10 days after having a baby. So because of that, we have to design, right?
Mhm.
So that I think it's really just having those supports in place and creating community around it.
Yeah, a lot of agency required there. Cheryl, let's go inward. This is something I think about a lot. I'm curious about what you're seeing from your clients in terms of, we all have these narratives we develop. We all have these voices that tell us we can or cannot do things. And I'm curious about what you're seeing in terms of what gets in the way of moms from taking care of themselves. Like, what are the big barriers, whether they're cognitive or emotional or whatever they might be? And then what would you say are some practical ways that moms could like just smash those barriers?
Yeah. It's a great question, a great topic, because there's a lot that gets in the way of women taking care of themselves, especially new moms. Um, Sometimes it's what's modeled for us, right? So all of a sudden becoming a mother means fully sacrificing yourself, giving up everything that you like, that you love, that you cherish to take care of another human being. So it starts off with that message of, well, yeah, this is what I do now. I have a baby and they come first. And so the notion of putting yourself first or putting on on your own oxygen mask, those kinds of messages that women get are kind of contradictory, though, to the real messages that women actually get, which is baby first, maybe family next, your spouse, your husband, your partner, whatever, and you last. That's really what's more supported in actuality. So it starts off, I think, with the messages, maybe the modeling, and then it's a confusing time in which when you're, especially when you're pregnant and you're getting ready to, you have these 9 months to prepare for the baby. It really is all about the baby. Even though you're growing the baby and what you do really matters, there's such an external focus on the baby, and it's new. And even if you are an experienced mom, even if you're having your second or your third child, every baby is different. So it's a humbling experience in which we're really trained to say, and almost wired to be very protective, to be very attuned to our baby and less attuned to our own selves. And that's why, I think during this transitional point, definitely asking for help is really important. I think anticipating your needs is really important. Like how are you going to be fed? I remember that was a really big thing for me. I would see a very obvious difference in my milk production if I was not hydrated and fed, but there were some times where there really wasn't anything. And grabbing a couple crackers and drinking some water wasn't going to cut it. I needed protein, I needed fat, I needed those things in my diet, but that took some meal prep time. So I think it's really important to rely on other people, to ask for help, to anticipate your other needs, and to listen, and even listen to elders. I think that's something that women these days have really gone away from. They are much more likely to go online and read an article or take even professional advice. And not that any of that is wrong, but there's really is some lived experience and wisdom in mothers and grandmothers and aunts and other people with older children that somehow we've lost the value of. It's like, oh, well, you had kids so long ago. I don't know if you know what it's like now. And it's like, no, they know what it's like. Like they might not know what the American Academy of Pediatrics is suggesting today on the first food introduction. That changes every couple of years, but they know the process. They know this beautiful transition, but also this difficult transition. And I just would love to see us getting back to so much more of that, respecting our elders, listening to their stories, incorporating them into our own.
I love that. And I will say, as somebody who is the sixth of seven children, my mom was just there was no even not taking her advice. You just take Mama Co's advice and that's it.
Great.
um, so, Latham, I'm curious if you have a really simple and practical piece of advice for this. I feel like there should be like a, like a secret fist bump or a handshake or something for anybody, any mom who's had a baby during the pandemic or is just coming, having one post pandemic. What would you say is like a piece of advice you'd give to a mom in this unique group of moms?
First of all, I love what Dr. Ziegler said about just honoring the wisdom of our ancestors and our elders. It is so critically important. And in that knowledge transfer that comes from being in community is so key. And I think it's cultural because I, again, in my family too, there is no not listening to the elders. So I think it's a different generation, right? That like is sort of like, oh yeah, whatever, we're gonna do it our way. And it's like there's literally a model for this, and it was put in place by your elders. So I love that you bring that in. And it's something we always lean into also in the doula work, right? Because there's so much information there. And I mean, I think that, you know, I I don't like this idea of like advice because it feels really like prescriptive for people that it may not fit, right? And I feel like what I'd rather kind of help people lean into is lean away from listening to others and like learn how to siphon off that listening of like all of the things that are coming in and be able to hear what's happening inside and
Mhm.
listen to what their intuition is telling them about their parenting, about what their needs are, and move in the direction of that to build the confidence, because I think that part of self-confidence, self-advocacy, self-efficacy, and feeling like you have agency in the world as a new parent is being able to have self-trust, right? And so it's not enough for someone to trust me or to trust us, right? They have to trust themselves. They have to feel like they have the capacity. And so I think capacity building really starts with, um, affirmation. I think it starts with people and community lifting you up and reminding you like every day that you can do it, even when you don't think that you can. I think it starts with tiny victories. Like I got outside today with the baby. That's a win, because I remember getting out the house before like 11. I was like, how do people do this? I've changed a diaper now. I got it like, and now there's vomit and it was constant. And then I finally got outside. I was like, yes, we made it to the yoga class. It's almost the end, but we made it. Right. And now my son's 18. And I look back and then I'm supporting other people and I see my nieces and godchildren. And I'm like, yeah, we do this all and we figure it out. And the best way I think to figure it out is to go through it and not alone, right? So it's sort of like how when we have little ones and they're learning how to navigate the world. So they start crawling on stuff and then like, holding on to furniture as they start to toddle. And we don't stop them and like, oh no, no, no. Like we just let them, right? And so it's like that gentle guidance of having the support there and someone who's looking upon you gingerly and making sure you're safe, but not inputting. Right. And so I think that value is sort of something that we should lean into when we are lovingly sharing advice to people, unless it's asked for. Right? Like, really, what do you think I should do with this? Because I know that you, as my elder, for instance, right? Like taking Dr. Ziegler's approach, like, hey, auntie, what would you do for this? Right? Or like that, then you can open up the floodgates. But if I didn't ask, like, please, like, let me
Yeah.
try to figure it out. Let me try to, like move through the world in a way that I get my bearings. And I think we owe this to parents because there's so much flooding of information everywhere that the thing I see a lot is mistrust, like mistrust in self and like not feeling fully grounded in a process that is, by the way, like biological and intuitive and natural, and we're like moving through it in a way where we feel like we're not even embodied. And so I try to lean away from giving my personal, lens on stuff and more just like, okay, how do we get you in your body around this? How do we get you to feel like, self-guided in this process rather than like me as a guide? I'm just here to kind of be a gentle supporter, right? And a cheerleader,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah, that's so, so important. I think that inner compass and really trusting it is probably one of the biggest challenges that moms have. And I will also just tag on that I think that, especially since we live in the age of social media, that embracing the fact that mistakes are part of the process and that it's not going to be perfect and that if you mess up, it's totally fine. Tomorrow's another day. I think that's just so important, especially right now. Cheryl, I have a question for you. So earlier, Lathan was talking about how about systems. You know, our big picture. The system is not really designed for postpartum support, and that is the case for all kinds of things to support moms. So I'd be curious about your recommendations about setting up our own systems and some practical ways. And Lathan was addressing this a bit earlier too, but what would you recommend as some practical ways that moms can build systems into their lives to really try to take care of themselves first?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think that, support, I think is a theme that people should be hearing by now, right? So having these support systems are important. And one thing that I talk about a lot, and I've learned throughout my journey of being a mother and also just growing into my womanhood, really, is that you have different people in your life for different reasons. And let's just say there I'm sure are women listening right now that no longer have their mothers, and so that doesn't mean that they cannot be nurtured, though. So you have to open yourself up to saying, I know I need nurturance. Where can I get nurturance? And accept it from where it is, instead of grieving or longing for something that we don't have, right? So becoming a parent brings up all that old stuff, right? Did you lose a parent? Do you not have a relationship with one anymore? What about your siblings? Have you recently moved? Are finances tight? Was this baby planned? Like, there's so much that goes into it emotionally. So I think, having knowing that there's not a manual, but there are some elements that are really critical to building a healthy and strong foundation, and support is probably top of list. So creating those in advance, pivoting when you need to, learning how to clearly communicate and ask for what you need. So saying to whoever's helping you, whether that's your mother or grandmother, an aunt, a friend, I really appreciate when you did this. That was really helpful. I didn't love it when, you walked in when I was nursing the baby. That's actually something I want to do in private. Like, I didn't have the words to say that, but I wish that I would have, because instead I was like crying, right? Because especially when you're trying to nurse or whatever it is in that early stages that's challenging for you, maybe you're trying to soothe them, you're trying to put them down, maybe your baby's colicking. A lot of times people want to come in and they think they're being helpful, and it may not feel that way to us. It may feel judgmental, we may feel more stressed. So I think being able to set up your system, accept who's in your system, recruit who you need for your system, and then communicate really clearly to them on what's helpful, what's not, and maybe just what you don't know. Saying, I don't know, like, you want to stay the whole weekend. That might be like exactly what I need. And I also have to say, maybe it won't be. And if I ask for space, I hope that you understand it's just because I'm trying to find my way. So I think if you can practice that, more and more you can do that communication, it would be critically helpful and important, especially in those beginning stages.
Yeah, that's so important. And I think I just want to like put a little underline under the word practice that you just mentioned because it does. It takes a ton of work. Okay, well, we're running down on our time here together. So I have a final question for both of you. And, let's imagine this. I know we've talked about kind of dispelling the notion of advice. So think about this as a recommendation in community for this community of moms and assuming that like it's advice that anybody can use. So like it doesn't involve money, it doesn't involve, whatever. What is one thing that you would recommend that all moms listening can do starting today in order to really start building that practice of wellness and self-care and dare I say self-love?
I'll speak from an experience that I had, which was I expected that the friends that I had going into pregnancy and on were going to be the same coming on the other side. I expected that the friendships wouldn't change. I expected that people would show up in the way that they did in my prior years of friendship with them and that it would look the same. And what I came to learn was that people who I felt like I counted on disappointed me. And they disappointed me because I actually hadn't put in place a framework for us to move forward from the way that I was prior to pregnancy and the person I was becoming as a mother. And so, what I think is really important as we move into this period that's so powerful, but also really vulnerable, is to decide intentionally who are the people that belong to me and who's going to be with me on this journey. And so I would do a lot of, inventory, really. Starting today, do that inventory to decide if you're pregnant. Awesome, because you can do that inventory early. If the baby is here and you're really assessing how you're feeling about how folks are showing up, there's probably people who are showing up that you didn't even expect. And you're like, oh my God, now I'm really close to this person who I didn't even depend upon or didn't even expect to show up in this way. And so I think it's really important to kind of design those friendship circles, really decide who can carry you on this journey and who you can depend upon, because on the other side, we need to be swaddled, right? Just like we swaddle babies, we need to be swaddled and support. And so who actually has a capacity to do that? We need to figure out who those people are that we know, and then who do we need to meet or bring in to fill those support gaps, right? And so that's where a doula can be very helpful, prenatal or postpartum. That's where other people like mental health providers, like our massage therapists or lactation consultant or acupuncturist, all these other people also help to fill roles. But who are those friends? Like, who's changing your pads and stuff when you go to the bathroom for the first couple of times if it's not your partner or your mama or your auntie, right? Is it a friend that's going to come over and who's, comfortable with you and that you feel comfortable with? And you don't realize because you think that they're going to be the folks you were always friends with, and many times they're not. And so I want to encourage people who are maybe feeling disconnected or maybe feeling like the friends that they hoped would be on the journey with you haven't showed up, that it's there's nothing about you, but you are moving into a new area of your life and you're crossing a threshold. And some of the people that were on this side can't come with you. And so it is important to ensure that people do come with you. And who are those people? And you can choose them. You can choose them. You can decide.
That's wonderful. And that image of being swaddled as an adult, I'm so into it. It's ridiculous. Cheryl, your thoughts on this?
So I think there's probably two things that I would say. The first one is, if you are raising your baby with your partner, you have to know that they're going to do things differently. And it is so hard at the beginning. You want it to be done your way. That's very common. Whether it's how you swaddle them, how you bathe them, how you feed them, even just what you play with them. And so I think it's really important because we keep talking about friendships and relationships. And if you're going into it with a partner, maybe with the other parent, it's really important that that relationship is maintained. And one of the biggest early complaints within, let's say, marriages are that, you know, the dad all of a sudden didn't seem to be important, or the other partner didn't, and that everything had to be the way the mom wanted it. And so I would just say that also takes practice, because you will just at times just feel like, unless there's a real safety issue, but you'll just feel like, no, 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 that's not how we do it, or that's not what time we do it, or that's not where we do that. And you do have to let some of that go. I would say that's the first piece. And the second piece is really to watch your mental health. There's upwards of, 50% of women that will feel what we just call the baby blues. And even though that might not be clinically diagnosable, it still is the blues. It's still sort of feeling down and just feeling tearful and not knowing why, and feeling torn between loving your baby, but then also, maybe saying like, is this it? Is this what I was waiting for? Why don't I feel all the feels I thought I was going to have? And so, I think that we're working on destigmatizing some of that, but there's a lot of isolation and maybe not feeling all of these magical, wonderful feelings that you were promised you were going to feel, and then being very private about that. And then that's the baby blues. And then we have conservative estimates as to actual postpartum depression, but they're all over the place. I mean, it seems like a good fair estimate would probably be even anywhere between 10 to 20% of women that have babies will experience an actual postpartum depression. And that's something to be taken very seriously. And so I would encourage women, even if you feel like for whatever reason in your social support systems you can't or don't feel comfortable talking to somebody, please talk to your doctor. Go to those follow up visits. Tell them how you're feeling. It might be therapy you might need. Maybe it's even medication you might need. Um, you might need to be told even what's happening and really process that through. So mental health is something that we know has a genetic component, we know has an environmental component. And so really being honest about where your mental health is will also help you attune to your child better. What is the probability, what is the likelihood that they may have some of the even transgenerational trauma that we can pass on. A depressed mom holds her baby less, looks at her babies in the eyes less. And those things have an impact. And so it's not to be shamed around it, it's to be educated around it and then work, to be able to work on that. So those are my probably the two things I would say.
That's wonderful. And I'm so glad that you brought that into the conversation, because it's such an important and just a real part of the journey and the process that there should not be stigma about. Dr. Cheryl Ziegler and Latham Thomas, you two are goddesses. This has been such a wonderful and loving, community driven and like supportive event. And it was such a joy to speak to you both, and to everyone joining this broadcast. We're so grateful that you spent the time. I feel like it was like self-care, so I'm hoping you are as well. And please remember to check out marchofdimes.org for resources to help you through every stage of your pregnancy. Take care, everybody.